We're going to get started. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. We're here today because in just a few minutes, the Supreme Court is going to hear the most consequential Second Amendment case in about a decade. We're here to talk about what's at stake. We're here to uplift the stories of survivors, and we're here for each other. Because showing up for each other is how we've made it this far in the gun violence prevention movement, and it's how we're going to keep going, even when it's tough, and it's how we're going to make the future of this country safer. My name is Angela Farrell-Zabala, and I'm the Senior Vice President at Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action. Our organization has been working in partnership with Giffords, the Brady campaign, March for Our Lives, and Community Justice Action Fund to plan today's event and to make clear that the potential consequences of today's case are pretty bad. We'll be hearing from 10 people whose lives have been forever changed by gun violence. But before we get going, I want to extend my personal gratitude for each of you for being here today and all of our survivors that will be sharing their stories today. And thank you to the folks that are tuning in live stream with us today. Folks, the stakes of this case are high. Every day in this country, more than 100 people are killed with guns and hundreds more are wounded. If the Supreme Court gives what the NRA is looking for in this case, it can make it harder for states and cities to take action to address this public crisis. This despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of people in this country, across political spectrum, in homes with and without guns, agree we should be doing more, not less, to make our communities safer from gun violence. So we're watching this case very closely. Across the country, people are watching closely. And our speakers today will be reminding us of how important this is, that we keep moving forward in the fight against gun violence. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speakers. I'd love to have the Gwen family join us this morning. Victoria, Gwen, and your family, please.
Good morning. I'm Krista Gwen. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm here to tell you my story. I lost my son in 2019 to gun violence. My son was coming home from the store. He got shot by a drive-by shooting. My whole world was turned upside down. Then, this year, January the 7th, my daughter was shot and wounded at a public park with her friend who lost his life. We are coping one day at a time. There's no getting used to losing a child who's only 19, or even watching my daughter who's trying to regain her strength, who is now 19. While my 13-year-old lives in reserve, not wanting to even go outside and play in the neighborhood that I live in. My husband and I have always stood for the livelihoods of our children at home. We've always opened our door to our youth for a safe place for them to go. My daughter's friends and family members were always welcome. Now that it is out of control in Louisville, Kentucky, the gun violence is astronomical. Our children are killing each other for no reason at all. We're losing them by the boatloads. Our future is leaving us fast. I should not be 50 worrying about who's going to be my caretaker because these children are losing their lives. We need to step up and stop the senseless violence that is going on, not just here, but everywhere. We need to speak up and be heard that gun violence needs to stop. We need to get a hold of this and get our street back.
My name is Victoria Gwen. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. My moving on after my accident is a hard road, losing my brother and a close friend. I lost a piece of me, but the fight won't let me see an example to never give up. Christian Gwen, he was 19. This is my best friend. Daywan Coward. I have 2 in my hip and a metal rod in my leg. I broke my femur bone. Right now, I went through a second surgery just last month. I had to get a screw removed. I'm possibly going through another surgery. It's an ongoing battle. I'm trying to regain my strength. And lastly, I've been trying to help the kids. I joined a program called Future Healers for the youth. I'm just trying to make sure the young ones don't grow up to pick up guns and do all this stuff that's going on now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Victoria and Gwen family. Thank you for sharing your story. I'd like to bring up Carmen Lodato from Everytown.
Good morning. My name is Carmen Lodato. I'm part of the Everytown Survivor Network and Moms Demand Action. It's an honor to be here representing our grassroots army of volunteers from every state in the country and from our mighty chapter here in DC. Together with partners across the country, including the other organizations here today, we've built a movement that's turned gun violence prevention from a third rail into a winning issue, from state houses to Congress to the White House. But we're not here just to talk about what we've done together. We're here to talk about what's at stake. And for me, that starts with telling you about my mom. My mom, Ruth Ann Lodato, loved sharing her passion for music with others, playing the organ at church and teaching a music program for local babies and toddlers. In the afternoons, she taught piano lessons from our home in Alexandria, Virginia. And I remember fondly seeing smiling children and their parents trickling in and out of our home. On February 6, 2014, our lives changed forever. When a stranger knocked on our front door, it was my mom who answered, having no way of knowing that he was carrying a gun or that he had previously shot and killed 2 other people. In the gunfire that followed, my mother, Ruth Ann Lodato, was killed. For years after my mom was killed, I opened up only to my family and close friends about my family's experience. But eventually I decided to honor my mother's memory with action, and I started sharing her story and connecting with other survivors through the Everytown Survivor Network. As survivors, each one of us has our own story, and we don't always agree on the specifics of this policy or that candidate, but we share so much, including an unshakable determination to fight for a safer future. This morning is a big day in that fight. In just a few minutes, the justices in this building will be hearing a case that, depending on what they decide, could open the door to a flood of challenges to gun laws across the country. We are here to make it clear. The gun violence prevention movement is watching closely. Survivors are watching closely. What's at stake in this case isn't a political win or loss. It's our progress in the fight to spare other families what ours have gone through. My mom always stood up for what was right, not only when it was easy, but when it was hard. Showing up today wasn't easy for any of us. The fight against gun violence never is. But we showed up today, and we'll keep at this tomorrow, because my mom should still be here loving her family and teaching piano lessons, and no one should have to go through what we have. Thank you so much, and keep going.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Fred Gutenberg up from Brady campaign.
Hey, everybody. I think I've met most of you here. My children were involved in the Parkland school shooting. My daughter Jamie was killed that day, and my son Jesse, with me on the phone, listened to the bullets that were killing his sister. For those of you who do know me, I've spent my life since fighting to reduce gun violence. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I almost didn't come here this morning. I went to sleep last night so upset at what happened in the elections that I almost didn't come. The idea that this critical race became a more important issue than active shooter drills infuriated me, because that's a legislative issue. But for those of you who have lost children to gun violence, you're going to understand when I say to you, I got a sign last night. Because at 11:54 p.m., after putting my phone down, I decided to look at it one more time. And I got a text message from a friend of mine who works in this town, and I won't say his name because it's not public yet, but he and his wife had a baby, and he was sending me a picture of the baby. And so I want you to know, I consider that a sign from my daughter and from baby Hank that I needed to get up and be here this morning, because what's about to happen here is a big deal. We are closer than we have ever been to being able to pass true gun safety legislation. We are also closer than we have ever been to losing the chance to do so. To my friends across the street with the signs that I see you back there. What we want to do here today has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. Saving lives is not a Second Amendment issue. I don't hate gun owners. I don't hate the Second Amendment. I hate gun violence. We should not be standing here today needing to beg to be able to save lives, to reduce the gun violence death rate, to reduce the instances of gun violence, and to reduce the severity of gun violence injuries when they happen. And let me tell you, they're going to happen again. It's predictable. It's also preventable. But there are 400 million weapons on the streets today. And the idea that this building behind us may say we can't do more to save lives, I'm sorry, I won't have that. Months after my daughter was killed, I attended the confirmation hearing for Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. For those of you who recall, after talking to Senator Blumenthal, I turned around and I attempted to shake his hand. And when I introduced myself and I said, my name is Fred Guttenberg, father of Jamie Guttenberg, who was murdered in Parkland, Florida, he turned his back on me. He turned around. He walked away, and he wouldn't shake my hand. Well, Justice Kavanaugh, I hope you and the other justices in there today don't decide to turn your back on the American people. I hope you all today understand gun violence can affect your family as well, can affect your community as well. And our desires here are not to infringe with anybody's right. Our desires here are to avoid having our rights infringed with. Our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our rights to... Absolutely. We have a right to life. We have a right to worship. We have a right to send our kids to school without fear. We have a right to go to a mall. We have a right to go to a movie. And we have a right to do so without the fear that our life will be ended by a bullet. And so, last night's election process really disturbed me. Being here today frightens me because I understand the consequences. But let me tell you something. My daughter sent me a sign last night. Whatever happens with this Supreme Court, we're not going away because your lives are worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. You're always an inspiration. With that, I'd like to introduce Greg Jackson from Community Justice Action Fund.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we had to have a rally like this a few years ago, and I think there was 3 times the people, but that doesn't mean it can't be 3 times the noise. So good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, that's much better. I'm Greg Jackson, the Executive Director for the Community Justice Action Fund, but I stand here more importantly as a survivor of gun violence. In April of 2013, I was shot as a bystander here in Washington, D.C., about 8 blocks from here. And I'll never forget when I was shot, you know, not feeling the rage and anger at the shooter, but just being confused about how someone who's having a verbal altercation could so easily choose violence as the option. And that bullet that hit me, you know, it put me in the hospital for 6 months, in and out of the hospital and recovery for 6 months. And in that same window of time, I saw elected officials and leaders, members of Congress right across the street, Supreme Court officials talk about this as a political issue and not life or death. And this is while I laid in the hospital bed, literally fighting for my life, and watching them talk about this as a controversial, hot button topic and not something that's life or death for so many in America. Gun violence is now the #1 cause of death for black men, the #1 cause of death for black youth, the #2 cause of death for black women and Latino men. And while that sounds like a statistic, there are real lives that have been lost from that epidemic. Since I was shot in 2013, nearly 1 million people have been shot or killed by gun violence. 1 million people. And in that million includes one of my childhood friends who was shot outside of a club in Greensboro. It includes one of my mentees, Carolyn Brown, who was out selling water bottles. 11 years old, got in an argument, and a grown man shot him down. Karan, his family is someone that we have stayed close with, and I'll never forget this past year when we had an event to honor him. You know, we dropped his mother off in one of the roughest, toughest, but most importantly, desperate and overlooked neighborhoods in this city. And I can't help but to think about how vulnerable families and communities like Karan's are. And when we make open decisions to encourage carrying and encourage firearms, we're literally saying it's okay to put guns into communities that are vulnerable to violence. And Karan's not the only one. Right behind my house, 1 block over, Devon McNeil was also shot and killed at a peace event on the 4th of July, at a Keep the Peace cookout, was shot and killed next to his mother and his brothers. These are the people that we're losing. While we're sitting here and debating this issue, we're losing lives like this every single day. And what was heartbreaking was driving here this morning, right across the street from where Karan was shot and killed, there was broken glass and 2 teddy bear vigils. And I couldn't help but to think whose lives were lost there. You know, this is a decision that will impact 80 million Americans. 80 million Americans who will maybe be exposed to violence that could not have to, or wouldn't have to, if the Supreme Court makes the right decision today. And I can't help but to think in that 80 million, how many more Karans, Devons, Akilas could be lost if they go the wrong way on this. And so we're standing here today to push for the Supreme Court to protect lives, to save lives, and recognize that lives like Karan's matter. Lives like Devon's matter. Lives like Akila's, fathers like Fred, survivors like me, we matter. And if they really care about saving lives and protecting our country and upholding justice, then where's the justice that should provide us all a safe place to go home to? A safe church to worship, a safe school to learn, a safe street to walk. And so I stand here emphatically begging, but also demanding that the Supreme Court step up and protect our lives, because they all matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate you. And next, I'd like to bring up Carolyn Dixon of Where Do We Go From Here?
Love and blessings, everyone. My name is Carolyn Dixon. I'm from South Jamaica, Queens. Like many here today, I did not want to come. I didn't go to sleep. I nodded out at 3 o'clock in the morning. all I could think of was my journey. And I ask you here today to close your eyes for a second and take this journey with me, if you may. It's May 5th, 2014. You with the person you love the most, your best friend, your partner. You're going out to get something to eat. But in the midst of it, you get into a little situation, a parking incident. The next thing you know, your best friend is shot and murdered and take their last breaths in your arms. Can you imagine that? Now open your eyes. As that being your child, that was my child that was murdered in front of me over a parking incident. I remember asking my mother, where do we go from here? She said, you must live. That's new to me because now I have a new life. How do I live without my child? What steps do I take? Living in South Jamaica, we're losing kids every single second of the day. I had to learn to live my new life without my child. It was very difficult. I lost everything. I almost lost myself. So I had to learn about the grieving process. I had to learn about the traumas that I was living in my community. See, black and brown people, we are not taught about the traumas and the grieving process that we must go through when our loved one dies. The thing that hurt me the most is when I had to go to a 1-year-old funeral who got shot in Brooklyn. I never in my life thought that I would have to see a 1-year-old in a coffin. I asked the Supreme Court today, yes, we don't want to take your guns, but we need a law to save our children, to save our lives. Too many of our children are dying. I'm tired of going to Jamaica Hospital 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to speak to parents, to give them support, just so they can survive whether or not their child will live. We, as human beings, must learn the value of life. We are not living back in the past of the Wild Wild West, but we're bringing it back. So I ask today that we bring love and comfort to these families. I love my survivor families. I love you. We have so much in common, but this gun violence must end. Much love and blessings, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you. Appreciate you. And next, I'd like to bring Reverend Emmanuel Lipscomb from Everytown Survivor Network.
Please excuse me as I'm sitting here and I'm like looking at the words on a page, but you know, I talk to a lot of survivors and a lot of people who have lost their children, and I tend to get too emotional during that time, so I've just got to keep myself on pace. My name's Reverend Emmanuel Lipscomb. I'm a fellow of the Everytown Survivor Network, a rescuer and a survivor of the World Trade attack, an awarded ex-director of the Martin Luther King Family Life Institute, and a community outreach minister for a church called Zion that's just a few miles from here. We're standing this morning near the center of Washington, D.C., a city I love, that I've called home nearly all my life, and that to this day is fighting a daily gun violence crisis that reminds me of how much is at stake with our decisions today. Like so many that grew up in D.C., I learned what gun violence was at a young age. I can remember my mother telling us to stay away from the windows when gunfire broke out near our home, because even when we were inside, like many youth of today, we can't count on being safe from stray bullets. Today, far too many young people growing up here in D.C., your hometown, and in many cities across the country, have to live with the same constant threats and fears. Listen closely. You can hear the sounds of gunfire. You know, we never forget what it sounds like. and we never forget the results. Let's be clear. This burden doesn't fall evenly across all the communities. In the 50 cities with the highest murder rates, Black Americans make only 30% of. 81% of the homicide victims are Black. I don't have enough time today to detail the policy decisions that have led us here, including decades of housing discrimination, segregated neighborhoods, and underinvestment in Black and Latino communities. But the results are clear. Communities of color, and in particular Black communities, are already disproportionately affected by gun violence. The truth is, we all lose, but we stand to lose the most if the Supreme Court makes it harder for states and cities to act, because if that court sides with the NRA, it will make it harder for us to give our young people the safety they deserve. We can build a safer city and a safer, more productive country. Dr. King stated, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now in this unfolding conundrum of life and history. There is such a thing as being too late. Our judicial leadership, let's not be too late to make the right decisions. We must understand that every decision we make as a people, and you, our justices, make, will bring us forward towards a greater, more productive community, or draw us backwards into the grievous, fruitless cruelty of chaos. I've seen how much we can do one block at a time, one neighborhood at a time, but particularly with the increases in violence we are seeing amid this pandemic, with the many disparities that are stealing away our hope, with the frustrations of building back jobs and stability for our families, with cries of injustice on every hand. We need our honorable Supreme Court justices to know the last thing we need is for the justices in this building to take us backwards, because we're moving on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Lipscomb. Thank you. I'd like to now welcome to the podium Alea Eastman of the Brady campaign, please. Alea Eastman. All right, we're going to move on to the next speaker. If I can have Bob Mokos of Giffords. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Too bad this never gets easier for all of us that come here to talk about our loved ones. But I stand before you as a gun owner, a veteran who took an oath to the Constitution, and as a gun violence survivor. Being a survivor of gun violence puts me and the family into a fraternity that nobody wants to join. The price is just too high. I was the middle child of 7 children. I had 5 sisters. My sister Charlene stands here with me today. I would like to talk about our oldest sister, Diane, who was approximately 9 or 10 years older than me. And so when I was 9 or 10, she was 19 or 20. And at that age for me, I looked up and admired her. And to this day, I consider her one of the nicest, most caring and loving persons I've ever known in my life. Diane became a registered nurse and eventually a midwife. And then she ended up starting the midwife program at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. And she actually was the head nurse midwife for the program. She was dedicated to children and worked for several children organizations, one of which honored her was the March of Dimes. Before going to work on certain days, she would stop at a church in the Hyde Park area. And this is where she was going before she went to work on July 19th, 1986. When she went to the church and she exited the car, and somebody came up to her and put a gun to her temple and pulled the trigger at close range. She was dead instantly. The police suspect a robbery because they found perpetrator fingerprints within the car and all over her purse. But today, the murder's still a mystery. She had no money. She was a divorced mother of 4 daughters. What followed next was the most difficult time we experienced as a family. Our youngest sister was at home when the police came by with a picture of the crime scene and actually showed her, our sister Melanie, the picture of Diane's bloodied head with a bullet hole in it and asked her to identify it, which she did. Shortly thereafter, my mom and Diane's ex-husband went to the morgue to identify the body, and they returned with Diane's eyeglasses covered in blood. And so my mom asked Charlene, can you clean these because we want to put them on Diane in the casket. So Charlene asked for my help, and no matter how hard we tried, we could not get the blood off the glasses that were in between the lens and the frame. And that's how those glasses were on her, and that's what we had to view, that blood on those glasses. It's a memory I'd much rather forget. Now, everybody here probably knows that there's about 100 people a day that die at the hands of a gun in this country. 100 a day, with hundreds more injured every single day. Now there's a Parkland, and there's a Las Vegas, and a Sandy Hook, and an Orlando, and those shootings tear at the nation's consciousness, and it moves the nation mightily. But of those 100 a day, it does the same to those families, 100 a day. Diane was our Sandy Hook, and that's how it affected us. So now we are at a crossroads. We've got to decide whether or not we want a society that's safe and free from guns, or are we going to have our children's lives and our loved ones be the price we pay for the Second Amendment? I know where I stand, because I took an oath for the Second Amendment. And finally, my dad loved to sing. He sang at all the family get-togethers. In fact, he was called Bing, after Bing Crosby. After Diane's murder, he never sang again.
Thank you so much, Bob, for sharing with us today. I'd like to bring Alea Eastman from the Brady campaign up, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here today and for inviting me to join you. I'm heartened by the inspired words of so many survivors here today. But I am angry that this is the second time in 2 years that I have addressed a crowd in front of this court because of the gun lobby's never-ending assault on gun violence prevention laws. My name is Alea Eastman, and I'm a junior at Trinity Washington University and Team Enough's national administrator. But I'm also a survivor of the 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where a gunman attacked 17 of my schoolmates and injured another 17. I had to hide beneath the lifeless body of my classmate, Nicholas Doret, to survive at the tender age of 16. Nicholas, who will forever be 17, had the aspirations of swimming at the Olympics, dreams that were ripped away from him in a classroom. While the shooting at Parkland is seared into our nation's memory, it is one of 300 fatal school shootings since the mass shooting at Columbine High School in 1999. And, as we have heard today, it is only one of the tens of thousands of instances of gun violence in communities, in schools, in homes, and in workplaces every year. I understand this violence from two perspectives. My uncle Patrick Edwards was also shot and killed in Brooklyn when he was only 18 years old. In our nation, over 40,000 people die from gun violence every year, an average of over 100 every day. So many more are shot and injured living the rest of their lives with physical and emotional scars. It is important to remember this violence is disproportionately impacting our Black and brown youth across the nation. The gun lobby has continuously tried to fight back our hard-fought public safety laws. That is unconstitutional. They continue the poor and overplayed argument that the laws we have seen work to prevent more gun deaths are a violation of the Second Amendment. That is not true. The truth is that these laws are constitutional, and the right to bear arms should not and will not overrule our right to live free from the fear of gun violence. We will not stop fighting for common sense gun laws in our country. The justices will hear our voices. We cannot allow them to roll back our progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alea. Thank you. And before we bring up our next speaker, I just want to take a collective breath with everybody. And one more. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. And with that, I'd like to bring Dion Green of the Brady campaign up. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I want to say I love each one of y'all families because it never gets easier. It just gets bearable. My name's Dion Green. The year 2019 was the worst year I ever had in my life. At the end of May, my house was taken away by the tornadoes that hit Dayton, Ohio. And the first day that I ended up getting out to hang out with my father, August 4th, 2019, in the Oregon district, a mass shooter come walking down the side of the building and opened fire, killing 9 in 32 seconds and injuring multiple people. And one of them 9 was my father, Derek Fudge, that stood right beside me. That vision, that night, is a vision that I would never forget. I just remember stepping over bodies, screaming on the ground, hugging my dad, telling him to pull through, having to watch him lose his life, while the shooter's sister is in front of me, asked me to call the police because she's been shot. I didn't believe it, because I don't believe this type of stuff should happen and happen. Going through the journey, and as I was now, like holding my father, begging, doing CPR, I don't understand how I didn't die. My father got shot 5 times, and we was shoulder to shoulder. So while I'm hugging on them, they're trying to pry me off of him. I'm on him like a just. I never knew this would have been my last moments with my dad. But at the beginning of the journey, somebody said, "Dion, at least you was there with your dad in them last moments." At first, I didn't understand it, but now I do. Because as he was leaving his earth, he got to know that his son was still alive. And that's why I do everything I do today. I stand up, I fight. I created a foundation to help survivors, because we are the ones that are still living through this pain, through the trauma, and we have to continue to move forward. And the 7 stages of grief was the shock and denial. I didn't want to believe it. My dad was going to call me. He's all right. And then the depression, bargaining with God. Why me? Why not me? Why you didn't take me? But then I ended up saying, why not me? And now I stand in front of y'all today and I fight. I put my heart out here on the line, and I just continue to be a voice. I continue to fight for what's right, protect our citizens by any means, whether it's victim to crime laws, all types of stuff. But this is a network I didn't choose; it chose me. And I'm sad that we all had to become family, but we have to lean on each other, because these moments, they become training. It's re-traumatizing. You know, every time I turn on the TV, I hear a shooting. I see a mass shooting. Like last time I talked to a senator, I said, "What do y'all do? Do y'all just turn on the news and see shootings, and then y'all just turn it off and go golfing?" I don't understand it. But I'm sorry. I'm done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dion, for sharing your story. We love you. Next, I'd like to bring up David Hogg, March for Our Lives.
Thank you. 1 second. I just want to say none of us should have to be here right now. At all. And when I started, I felt so angry. Angry that my sister had to go through what she did, losing 4 friends that day when she was 14 years old in Parkland, Florida. But I've realized in the time since what I feel is an anger. It's righteous indignation. It's a sense of injustice. Because the reality is we are not politicizing this issue. The people that are politicizing this issue are the people that are holding up signs behind us. We don't want to be here today. We are here fighting for what we already know, which is our right to not be shot. And what our generation is tasked with here, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm a survivor of Parkland, Florida, the shooting that happened there. 17 of my classmates and 17 of my classmates and teachers were killed there, along with 17 others being injured, and thousands traumatized and thousands of families forever changed, including my own. We just submitted a brief in this case, written by a team of undergraduate researchers who were 20 years old at the time. In the last case that the last time that there was a case this big at the court was in 2008 with DC versus Heller. Our judicial advocacy team is a team of 4 undergraduate researchers. You know how old they were when Heller was decided? They were in 1st grade. We must refuse to pass this on to another generation. That is why we are here today. That is why we are fighting here today. And it's been nearly 4 years since the Parkland shooting that devastated my entire community. And those that have been hurt, those that have been targeted are survivors, but so are thousands of others who fear for their safety on a daily basis, because that's, stolen by a gun. And there are truly just far too many of us to count at this point. I can't tell you how disturbing it is knowing what is going to be decided here today is very much going to impact whether or not there are future survivors with us that we don't even know yet. That's one of the most disturbing realities of doing this work over the past 4 years, is seeing how this club that nobody wants to be a part of continues to grow. And that's why we're here today, because our nation, our republic is in crisis. We cannot protect our young people, we cannot protect our older people, we cannot protect anyone because of the constant state of gun violence in this country. And we're here at the Supreme Court to make that plea to our government, to value its people over the dangerous gun lobby that filed this case. Do not take away what little protection exists in the law in one of the deadliest epidemics in our nation's history, the epidemic of gun violence. We are asking for something simple, and that is our safety. We are asking for life. We are asking for liberty, and for freedom from fear. It is immoral and unthinkable to ask future generations to continue to bear this burden. This is the fight of our lifetime, and we've got work to do. And I have to tell you, it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And the reality is, many of us today here, especially the young people that we are with today, like our judicial advocacy team who wrote this brief, and I tell them this all the time, ultimately, we're going to outlive these people, and we're going to win.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to bring Eric Lundy up to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Even as we gather here in tragedy, it is still an honor to be with all of you. For me personally, it's especially an honor to be with the person I'm introducing. I frankly know that I can't do it justice, so Congresswoman Giffords, would you like to come up and introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Gabby Giffords. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. January 8th, 2011 changed my life forever. I was a congresswoman. I was shot in my head while meeting with my constituents. I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. I watched gun violence destroy too many lives. After the shooting at Sandy Hook elementary school, I've said enough is enough. I've founded a group called Giffords. We are on a mission to end gun violence.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So, 16 years ago, I came pretty close to actually not being able to be here with you all. I came just a few inches from not being able to be here with you all today. The bullet that struck me that November day almost took my life. For a while, for a few weeks, it took my mobility, and for a lot longer than that, it took my sense of hope. But I got it back because I started listening and hearing the stories of people who've been down this road before me. I started listening and hearing the stories of survivors like you all who found the courage not just to get out of bed in the morning, which that's one thing, but the courage to keep on fighting for what's right. And I found hope again by hearing stories like Congresswoman Giffords, who after surviving, a horrific incident and undergoing what was already an extremely tough physical rehabilitation fight, decided to take on an entirely new fight, a fight to end gun violence. Congresswoman Giffords, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to get here and what that means for all of us?
I've known the darkest of days of pain and uncertain recovery. But confronted by despair, I've summoned hope. Confronted by paralysis and aphasia, I responded with grit and determination. I put one foot in front of the other. I found one word and then I found another. My recovery is a daily fight, but fighting makes me stronger. Words once came easily. Today I struggle to speak, but I've not lost my voice. America needs all us to speak out, even when you have to fight to find the words. I'm also in a second fight, the fight to stop gun violence. It's also a fight forged by tragedy and pain, a fight that can change lives. We are at a crossroads. We can let the shooting continue, or we can act. We can protect our families or our future. We can vote. We can be on the right side of history. Please join us in this fight. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Giffords, and thanks to all that you've done to inspire us. Thank you, too, to all of the speakers for sharing your stories today, and thank you to everyone who showed up today and tuned in from afar. The stories we heard today make clear how much is at stake today, and they are also a reminder of how much strength, how much resilience is in our gun violence prevention movement. That resilience has already done so much to turn the tide in this country when it comes to addressing gun violence. There's still so much to do, but we're in it together, and we're in it for each other, and we've come way too far to let up now. Thank you to everyone, and God bless.